Okay, guys, my voice is still pretty messed up, um, but I wanted to talk about POL. This was a crazy runner, man. I thought this had a really interesting daily chart. I'm like, this isn't really your normal gap and crapper. It has kind of a massive gap fill. It's an Amex stock. It is a tiny float, so it traded like a tiny float, but um, yeah, we'll talk about. I actually had a pre-market long on this that I pretty much maybe lost like 3% on. The chart is too big to show, so I shorted the this kind of little backside pop. It did this like big high volume push, and then I shorted the second push because there was a nice little bookmap read, and I risked 220 because that's where the asks were on the book, and I got stopped out. And then I made a long. I did a long at the top. This is your classic long at the top strategy. It's because they stacked a bunch of bids. This was just a bid, logging into bid type of play, and and it had an empty order book to the upside, and it just went straight up. I sold it the first kind of bounce that there was because there was a lack of bid support, and that's the only long I made. I made like 60 cents on this, and then I started shorting it. Um, the first short was the massive soak into hidden seller at the $4. Um, this is a great pattern. Uh, it initially worked, and I just wanted to take a little bit off at 15-20% profits. But the problem with this is that $4 was super painted. So when it started rotating back up, I just put my stop loss at just above $4, and thankfully, Trade Zero executed me. In the afternoon, um, I didn't short. My internet actually was kind of messing up between 110 to 130, so I actually wasn't on my computer for this. But this type of, this is a high day squeeze into a down only pullback. We've seen these pullbacks be really strong because there's no liquidity trap at the top. Now, maybe you could have shorted this candle in the eights, but which would have been a bad play. I actually would have been really tempted to short this candle. I would have just assumed this aggressive move wasn't going to break high a day, and I would have tried to short in the eights on this. Obviously, it wouldn't have worked, but at least your risk would have been really tight. And then we'll talk about this short. So obviously, the more a stock goes up, the more likely it is to do some long trappy stuff at the top. And I loved how aggressive this reclaim was, and I love the second push. So I put a little bit on, but I wanted to be careful because I usually like to wait on strong stocks. A lot of times it takes a while to fade. Um, and I thought this move was kind of quick, so I just put a little bit on, and then I got a much better move with no bid follow up here, and then when this rotation didn't go, I added some more. So and then this is the 1 minute 200. I took a little bit off on the rotation, and then I actually covered towards the end of the day. Um, I kind of took the screenshot earlier, so um, we'll talk about the chart before the book. It seems like me covering end of day was not the play. I should have just swung it. I was afraid of the 1 minute 200 going straight up, and I kind of did a little pussy cover. So here's the chart. My view app's kind of broken. You can ignore it. So we had this big parabolic and this big squeeze right here. Now, at the time, I didn't really have a read on this push, so I didn't short this, even though it's actually quite a good short. It's actually a fake 5 minute flag that instantly tops over and over and over again. But I didn't really have the read, so I wasn't short this. And then it consolidated with these higher lows and rotated, and I actually longed a rotation, even though it's a very retail-esque rotation because of the higher lows. But I thought that, this was 2.48 and this was 2.45. I thought the high day paint was really, really strong. So I thought any bullish rotation into this painted lower high would squeeze it. So that's what I was telling my Discord. I was like, 2.5 and 2.45 is super painted. You could see how, even right here, I already think this is a big paint job, especially in a strong market. And then when this didn't go and I got stopped out, I was like, I'll just wait for market open. And I actually thought I was going to get a dip in a rip, but it didn't happen. And I was afraid to do it because of the book. The book was not very good at market open for this. So usually the way market open longs work is retail chases the market open push. There's no bids under the push, right? It knifes them, and then the bids come in. And there was a big bidder right here, but I didn't react fast enough, and I didn't want to chase into the 220s because I noticed that there's multiple asks being stacked up here. And I thought, oh, well, there's just one bidder. So I was like, let me wait for that bidder to get tested. So I waited for this to come back down, and he ended up just going straight down through all these bids. And I was like, well, okay. I thought I was going to get an insane market open long. I thought I was going to long like 210 and it was going to squeeze at like $3. I thought it was going to be great. And then I actually kind of stopped looking at it until this pop. So here's my first short. We have a massive backside squeeze. It's okay. You should get play that. We had this big backside squeeze, and I thought, oh, it's taking out all these lower highs. It's kind of filling this empty space. Some longs might be chasing it. And I loved on the second push, we had a really nice stack of asks and no bid follow up, right? There's like these temporary bids that were pushing it up, but now all those bids are gone. And we start to get not only these offers, but new offers come in. So I was actually short up here, and I thought this looked great. But then something really, really, really bad happened where it consolidated. And I don't really mind the consolidation because I have multiple asks that this has to go through. But then they started throwing up like 50,000 share bids, and I was like, this is really not, like, either these bids are fake and it's going down, or I got to get out. And here's a 220 guy. And as you see, there's like zero space between 220 and 230. And then you got to remember the high day paint job, right? There's like that insane paint job at 245, 250. So I always remember that. I was like, well, there's an insane lower high paint, which produces some of the biggest squeezes is when high day gets painted with lower highs right below it. So you have like 4 or 5 lower highs right below high day. If it rotates through that high day, um, people get squeezed, and I decided to hold through these bids. I didn't go long, even though it was insane, and you got instant confirmation, but I just took the loss. My long is into this bid. Do you see these bids? So there's an empty book, right? Bid, bid, bid. I just longed into the bids, and I sold everything on. If we go back to the chart on this bounce, so it went straight up, it pulled back, and then it did this bounce here, and this bounce had no bids under it. I was very afraid. I didn't want to short it because I don't think it wasn't like very. It's not long enough. Like, it's too volatile to get a good read on the short. But I didn't like having no bids foul this up, so I just sold everything up here. And then it cracked. And of course, we see why on strong stocks. The reason you want long traps like this is because you know longs are chasing and are stalling. But quick pullbacks from high day like this are actually super strong, right? And they're super strong because it creates a ton of empty space on the book. The book here is so empty that they just throw up like 3 bids and they push it. Now I didn't get this long because I thought maybe it would push and stall. So I was like, okay, maybe start looking for the short in the 330s here, and it went straight up. So I was like, okay, well, I'm not in that long. Um, and then if we start looking at the top, I don't want to short any of this because there's bids. There's bids. There's all these bids. There's all these bids. There's all these bids. There's bids. Like you really don't want to guess when the bids are gonna, um, when the bids are gonna disappear, right? The reason this is such a good short, even though it didn't work, is because they swipe the bids. Then when they manipulate it back up, the order book is a lot emptier, right? So as you see here, besides this one guy at 362, the order book is empty, and the order book is empty as you go compare that to here, and we got lots of bids building. Like there's bids, in which in low float land, the extreme moves clean out the order book, which is why I was waiting. I actually thought this was okay. They had a mini one right here at 1201, 1202, and they had new offers come in. This actually wasn't bad. But I usually I found that on the really strong ones, like plays like UCAR, plays like this, these like crazy strong parabolics, the best short tends to come like almost like at least 10 to 15 minutes after high day. Sometimes it comes 30 minutes after high day, 40 minutes after high day. It kind of, the strongest ones have so much liquidity that they need to set up a structure and do some type of long trappy move. So this was really nice. They even threw up a 50K bid here to push into this ask, and then they pulled it and it rolled over. And I was like, cool, let me just take off a little bit because I'm up, 50, 60 cents. Um, and then, yeah, but it's the same problem. There's a lot of, every time you get a quick dump like this, there's a lot of empty space. And I never know what's going to happen. Sometimes, I thought maybe this would stall at 3.8s with the lack of bid support and roll over, but I was already positioned from earlier. I wasn't going to add. And I also knew that if you look at this $4 super painted. Look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's like 6, 7 candles, all at four. And there was a hidden seller on this push at $4, holding this down. So I knew $4 was a huge level, and I knew that high day was right here. So I just put my stop loss right at 4. And I luckily Trade Zero executed me before everybody got squeezed. That's always a good thing. Trade Zero actually, the one thing Trade Zero is good at is executing stop loss orders. On other brokers, you get slippage in a lot of cases. So, and then yeah, my internet kind of, you can actually tell right here, my internet kind of messed up. So I didn't see any of this price action, right? I pretty much saw none of it until it started doing crazy things. But by the way, look at this push. It does a big push. There's a bunch of asks stacked right here. It does a big push in a swipe. And now that's bullish because now the book is empty to the upside and you can see the bids coming in. Look at all these bids. This is why in this area, after the squeeze, of course my internet was out from like here to here, right? So maybe I would have shorted this. I can't tell you just because my internet was working. But this was there's so many bids on this push. Like there's no reason to short this because of how many bids were being stacked, right? It was very scary with follow-up bids with follow-up bids. One thing I thought was really interesting is on the high day candle, they pulled all the bids. You could see them pulling the bids. the second it hits high a day. And I thought that was potentially super bearish. I was like, maybe this is beginning to top because I saw how many bids got pulled down here. But you still don't want to chase because stuff like this could still happen, right? Stuff like these crazy moves, these crazy reclaims and these moves could still happen. But I didn't want to short up here because new bids started showing up, and I was like, okay, let me just be a little patient. And then they pulled it. I was like, okay, here's like a 20% pull. You know, this thing's so manipulated. There's a lot of empty space. Let me wait for the bounce through the empty space. And I loved how aggressive this bounce was because you got to understand that on every pullback, longs have been rewarded for buying the dip on every single pullback on here. Every single one. This entire move, longs have been rewarded. So if longs see a big reclaim, eventually it's going to stop working. That's the thing. The odds are in the short's favor. Every single big short squeeze, it becomes a better short. So when I see big reclaims like this, you know, I like to wait for the pullback, and I thought, oh, it has a nice $10. So these candles were topping at $10, $10. And then I saw the ask at $10. I was like, I'll short when it breaks the ask, right? Because I know people will chase it. So I had some here, and then this one was actually a lot better. Like, I love how extreme this move is. This is 10% in under 2 minutes, right? Um, so I had some on from here. Oops. I had some on from this is that 10. So you can see the ask at 10. They broke the ask. I shorted that, right? And then they had this crazy move. I saw that there's no bids following this up, and I added to my short. And here's that little $10 rotation. And they pulled the bids. They pulled the bids, and this rotation failed, so I added more here on my short. So, and then it started doing a bunch of manipulated stuff, you know, stuff like this. Stuff like this. But on really strong stocks, this is how they fade. You get the reaction you want, you get a 10% bounce, and then it goes down, right? And then you get a 10% bounce, and then it goes down, right? And then you get more 5%, 3%, but like all these crazy bounces. Like it was trading like this. These are all like crazy 40, 30, 50 cent bounces that, you know, this one being almost $1 bounce, um, that ended up just going nowhere. And again, because longs have been taught, and by the way, look at the book now. Look at the book on these bounces. Now we're finally getting an order book imbalance, right? Between these million asks and these no bids. And this thing is up 1,000%. It's not going to go up forever, right? So we have a massive, you know, we have very long trappy price action finally working, and we have new asks coming in. This is really, really good. So, you know, initially I was going to wait for it to crack 8 and cover, but then it just went straight down to the 1 minute 200, so I just started taking some sub $7 covers at the 1 minute 200. And yeah, so this is, you know, this is one of those plays these are the easiest trades to lose on, obviously, if you're short. There's a lot of anomalies with this. You know, look how many legs up it makes, you know. Even in a strong market, this happens maybe 2, 3 times in a month, and that's in the strongest of strongest markets, and it's not normal. You know, the reason I play these shorts here is because most of the time, stocks will only give, you know, they painted at 2.5, they did a big squeeze, right, and then they long trap it and they pull it. So every when I see a big squeeze like this, I think, okay, shorts got squeezed, longs are chasing this candle, and it's not working. Time to go in. And I just play the odds that this type of price action will roll over, and there's always a chance it doesn't, right? But the probability is in my favor because most of the time when a stock is this extended and has done this many short squeezes, it'll fade 30, 50%. And then, and especially if you're um, waiting for good signals like this. This initially worked. I only took out maybe a quarter. Um, but also the reason you want good averages is when this stuff happens. I got stopped out 10, 15 cents on the rest of my position. And this thing went up, another $7. Um, so yeah, this one is just hanging around. Maybe it was I just covered it. I just covered 1 minute 200, a little bit on this rotation, and then just towards the end of day. That's just my. So I'm actually overall green on the trade. My long wasn't very big, um, but what do you call it? The short. My shorts were the first one was like a 7 cent loss, and the second one, because I took that partial, was like a what do you call it? Like a break even trade, and then maybe a little bit. No, it's like small red, and then this one I made a good amount on. Right, I made almost $3 a share, so it ended up working out. But yeah, not easy, man. Not easy. It's hard. I just have a lot of context and knowing like being patient on these pushes, not chasing these lower highs. I probably, I'm not gonna lie, I probably would have shorted this if I had a chance, but and probably would have just insta lost on it. But yeah, it's not easy, man. It's. I'll say one of the big thing about the best trades, like this high today was at 11:53. This move is at 12:17. That's almost 25 minutes later, right? Like you could actually write down how much time it takes for like the ideal move to show up. It's the same thing with this. This was at 1:45. This move was at 14:02, and this move was at 2:02 and 2:10 p.m. So that's a solid 15 to 30 minutes from high day, right? So it's like on the strong ones, the best moves. You need higher lows, you need longs to chase, you need structure, and you need to read the book. You need to give it time to set up. Um, on the crazy strong ones, right? So hopefully that was helpful. And yeah, I just my voice ain't great, but I'll try to do more videos in a bit. So hopefully that's helpful. See you guys.